The stage-coach door swung open, and Helena Dawson stepped down onto the dusty street of Johnson City, Texas, with nothing but the torn dress on her back and a fury in her green eyes that could have scorched the desert itself. She had escaped her uncle's clutches in St. Louis 3 weeks ago, riding trains and wagons and walking miles when neither was available, running from a man who had sold her dead father's business and planned to sell her next into a marriage she would rather die than accept. The journey had stripped her of everything: her bags stolen in Fort Worth, her money pickpocketed in Austin, until all she had left was her determination and the address of a distant cousin who supposedly lived somewhere in this God-forsaken town. Except when she asked at the general store, the shopkeeper just shook his head and told her that family had moved on to California 2 years back. Helena stood on that wooden sidewalk as the October sun beat down mercilessly, watching the stagecoach pull away in a cloud of dust, and felt something close to despair trying to claw its way up her throat. She was 22 years old, alone in a town where she knew no one, without a single cent to her name or a place to sleep that night. Her stomach had been empty since yesterday morning, and her legs trembled beneath her skirts. "You look like you could use some water, miss," a voice said behind her, low and rough like gravel mixed with honey. Helena turned to find a man standing there, tall and broad-shouldered, with dark hair that curled slightly at his collar and eyes the color of strong coffee. He wore dusty work clothes and a wide-brimmed hat, and there was something in his weathered face that spoke of loneliness as deep as her own desperation. He held out a canteen, and she noticed his hands were calloused and strong, the hands of someone who worked hard for everything he had. Pride told her to refuse, but thirst won out. She took the canteen and drank deeply, the water tasting like salvation. When she handed it back, she met his eyes squarely, lifting her chin despite everything. "Thank you. I am afraid I cannot repay your kindness at the moment." "Did not ask you to," he said simply. "Name is Marcus Dalton. I own a ranch about 5 miles north of here. Could not help but notice you stepping off that stage looking like the world had chewed you up and spit you out." The blunt assessment should have offended her, but Helena found herself almost wanting to laugh. "That is remarkably accurate, Mr. Dalton. I am Helena Dawson, recently of St. Louis, and I appear to be stranded in your town with no money, no belongings, and no prospects whatsoever." Most men would have walked away right then, wanted nothing to do with a woman dragging that much trouble behind her. But Marcus Dalton just studied her for a long moment, those dark eyes taking in her torn sleeve, her dusty hem, the proud set of her shoulders despite it all. Then he did something she did not expect. He smiled just a little, and it transformed his whole face from severe to something almost gentle. "Well then," he said slowly, "I suppose we start with everything that matters." She frowned, confused. "I just told you I have nothing." "I heard you. But you are standing here, breathing, with fire in your eyes and steel in your spine. That is something. That is enough." He shifted his weight, looking almost uncomfortable. "Look, I am not good with pretty words, Miss Dawson, but I have a problem, and maybe you do too, and maybe we can help each other. My ranch needs a woman's touch, has for the 5 years since my mother passed. I have been living like a hermit out there, and the house shows it. I need someone who can cook, keep house, maybe help with the bookkeeping since I am terrible with numbers. In exchange, you would have a place to stay, food to eat, and I would pay you a fair wage. Nothing improper, you understand. You would have your own room with a lock on the door, and my foreman and his wife live in the cabin just across the yard." Helena stared at him, trying to find the trap in his offer, the catch that would turn this into another nightmare. But his eyes were steady and honest, and she had always been good at reading people. This was a lonely man making a practical offer, nothing more. And God help her, what choice did she have? Why would you offer this to a complete stranger? She asked, needing to understand. Marcus looked away then, out toward the horizon where his ranch supposedly waited. Because 5 years ago my mother was dying, and a stranger in this town gave her water when she collapsed on this very street. Small kindness, but it mattered. Been thinking I should pass that along when I get the chance. Also, I really am terrible with numbers, and I burned my dinner 3 times last week. The corner of his mouth quirked up slightly. Mostly that last part, if I am being honest. Despite everything, Helena felt something loosen in her chest. Here was a man who could joke at his own expense, who offered help without expecting her to grovel for it. She made her decision in the space between one heartbeat and the next. All right, Mr. Dalton. I accept your offer, with the understanding that if either of us finds the arrangement unsuitable, we can end it with 2 weeks' notice. And I will need that promise about the lock on my door in writing. Fair enough, he agreed. I need to pick up supplies here in town, then we can head out to the ranch. You can meet Ruth and Samuel, my foreman, and his wife. Ruth will vouch for my character such as it is, and I will write up a proper contract tonight, soon as we get you settled. An hour later, Helena sat beside Marcus on the bench of a sturdy wagon loaded with supplies, rolling through the Texas countryside toward an uncertain future. The October air had cooled slightly, and she watched the landscape change from the scrubby outskirts of Johnson City to rolling grassland dotted with cattle bearing a brand she could not quite make out from this distance. The Broken Arrow Ranch, Marcus said, noticing her gaze. My father won the land in a card game 25 years ago, then spent the next 15 years building it into something worth having. When he died, my mother kept it running, and when she passed, it fell to me. Got about 2,000 head of cattle, 30 horses, good water rights, and a house that has not had a woman's touch since I do not know when. You have run it alone for 5 years, Helena asked, genuinely curious. Samuel helps, and I hire on extra hands for roundup and cattle drives. But the day-to-day, yeah, that is on me. Gets lonely sometimes. He said it matter-of-factly without self-pity, but Helena heard the truth underneath. This was a man who had been alone too long, who had forgotten what it was like to have someone to talk to at the end of a hard day. I know something about lonely, she found herself saying. My parents died when I was 16. Typhoid took them both within a week of each other. My uncle became my guardian, and at first he seemed kind enough. But after a year or so, his true nature showed. He sold my father's shipping business, the one that should have come to me, and spent the money on his gambling and drinking. Then 3 months ago, he informed me I was to marry his business partner, a man of 50 with 2 dead wives already and a reputation for cruelty. I refused, and he locked me in my room, so I climbed out the window and ran. Marcus was quiet for a moment, his jaw tight. That took courage, leaving everything you knew. It took desperation, Helena corrected. Courage would have been staying and fighting, I just ran. Sometimes running is the smart choice, Marcus said firmly. Sometimes knowing when to leave is the bravest thing you can do. You survived, Miss Dawson. You got yourself across half the country with nothing but your wits. That is not cowardice. His words settled something in Helena that had been unsettled since the night she climbed out that window in St. Louis. She had been calling herself a coward for weeks, but maybe he was right. Maybe she had been brave after all. The Broken Arrow Ranch appeared on the horizon like something out of a dream, a sprawling house of weathered wood surrounded by barns and corrals and outbuildings. It was bigger than Helena had expected, clearly built by someone with ambition and the means to achieve it. Cattle grazed in the distance, and she could see several horses in a nearby corral, their coats gleaming in the afternoon sun. Marcus pulled the wagon up to the main house, just as a door opened in one of the smaller cabins, and a woman emerged, round-faced and smiling, with dark skin and graying hair pulled back in a neat bun. She was followed by a lean man with silver threading through his black hair and the patient eyes of someone who had seen a lot of life. "Marcus Dalton, did you bring home a stray?" the woman called out, but her tone was warm with affection. "You have been talking about finding help for months but never did anything about it." "This is Miss Helena Dawson, Ruth," Marcus said, climbing down from the wagon and then turning to help Helena down. His hands at her waist were impersonal but steady, and he released her the moment her feet touched the ground. "Miss Dawson, this is Ruth and Samuel Morgan. They have been with the ranch since before I was born." "Ruth, Miss Dawson has agreed to take on the housekeeping and cooking, and maybe help me figure out why my account books never balance." Ruth came forward and took both of Helena's hands in hers, studying her face with kind, knowing eyes. "You look exhausted, honey. When did you last eat?" "Yesterday morning, I think," Helena admitted, suddenly dizzy with the relief of being somewhere, of having people around her who seemed kind. "Samuel, help Marcus with those supplies," Ruth said briskly, already steering Helena toward the main house. "I am going to get this girl fed and settled. Marcus, you show her where her room is and make sure it is presentable, then give us some privacy. Come on, honey, let us get some food in you and then we will talk." The inside of the ranch house was exactly as Marcus had described, functional but neglected, clean enough but without any of the touches that made a house a home. The main room held a large stone fireplace, sturdy furniture that had seen better days, and walls bare of any decoration. But the kitchen was spacious and well-equipped, and within minutes Ruth had bread and cold beef and fresh butter laid out on the scrubbed wooden table. Helena ate slowly at first, trying to maintain some dignity, but hunger got the better of her and soon she was eating like the starving woman she was. Ruth just sat across from her, sipping coffee and smiling gently. "That man has a good heart," Ruth said after a while. "Known him since he was born, and I am telling you true, he would not harm a hair on your head. But he has been alone too long, gotten too used to his own company. This arrangement might be exactly what he needs, what you both need." "You do not think it is strange that he offered a job to a complete stranger?" Helena asked. "Honey, Marcus is a lot of things, but impulsive is not one of them. If he brought you out here, it is because he saw something in you that told him you were trustworthy. That man can read people like Samuel reads cattle trails, has not steered him wrong yet." Ruth leaned forward, her expression serious. "But I am going to ask you straight. Are you running from the law? Because that would cause problems we do not need." "No," Helena said firmly. "I am running from my uncle and the man he wanted to force me to marry, but I have broken no laws. Everything I did, I had every moral right to do, even if society might disagree." "Good enough for me," Ruth said, satisfied. "Now let me show you your room and then you should rest. Marcus will want to go over everything tomorrow, show you how things work around here, but today you just need to recover from your journey." Helena's room was on the second floor, a spacious corner space with windows overlooking both the front yard and the eastern pastures. It held a large bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand, and a comfortable-looking chair by the window. True to Marcus's word, there was a sturdy lock on the door, and when Ruth handed her the key, Helena felt the last of her fear begin to ease. "Ruth," she said softly as the older woman turned to leave, "why did Marcus never marry? He seems like the kind of man women would be interested in." Ruth smiled sadly. "He was engaged once, about 7 years ago, girl named Susan from one of the neighboring ranches. But she decided ranch life was too hard, too lonely, and she ran off with a salesman heading to San Francisco 3 weeks before the wedding. Broke Marcus's heart, and he has not looked at a woman seriously since. Threw himself into the ranch, into work, and forgot how to be anything but lonely. She paused at the door. Maybe you both needed to find each other. Sometimes the Lord works in mysterious ways. After Ruth left, Helena lay down on the bed, intending to rest just for a few minutes. But exhaustion claimed her, and she slept through the rest of the afternoon and all through the night. 14 hours of deep, dreamless sleep that her body desperately needed. She woke to golden sunlight streaming through the eastern window and the smell of coffee and frying bacon drifting up from downstairs. For a moment, she was disoriented, forgetting where she was, but then memory returned, and with it a sense of something that might almost be hope. Helena washed her face in the basin, did her best to make her torn dress presentable, and made her way downstairs. She found Marcus in the kitchen, standing at the stove with a spatula in hand, looking adorably confused by the bacon that was burning in the pan. "I see what you mean about needing help," Helena said from the doorway, and Marcus whirled around, looking embarrassed. "I swear I can do this," he said, scowling at the smoking pan. "I just get distracted and then everything burns." "Step aside," Helena said, moving past him to rescue what could be saved of the bacon and crack fresh eggs into another pan. "If I am to earn my keep, I should start doing so. Besides, I have not cooked in weeks and I find I missed it." They worked in surprisingly comfortable silence, Helena cooking and Marcus setting the table, moving around each other in the kitchen like they had been doing this for years instead of hours. When they finally sat down to eat, Helena looked across the table at this man who had pulled her from the edge of disaster and felt something warm unfurl in her chest. "Thank you," she said quietly. "For yesterday, for this, for giving me a chance when you had no reason to." Marcus met her eyes, and there was something in his gaze she could not quite name, something warm and steady and real. "You would have done the same if our positions were reversed. I could see that about you right away, Miss Dawson. You are the kind of person who helps when they can." "Helena," she said. "If we are to work together, you should call me Helena." "Marcus," he replied, a small smile tugging at his mouth. "Only my mother called me Mr. Dalton, and that was usually when I was in trouble." After breakfast, Marcus showed Helena around the ranch properly, introducing her to the hands who worked there and explaining how things operated. The Broken Arrow ran efficiently despite Marcus's claims of disorganization, and it was clear the men respected him. He was fair but firm, expected hard work but gave it himself, and treated everyone from his foreman to the newest ranch hand with the same gruff courtesy. The house, as he had warned, was a disaster from an organizational standpoint. The kitchen was well stocked but chaotic, the pantry a jumble of supplies without any system. The account books were a nightmare of crossed-out figures and confusing notes. The main rooms were clean but stark, lacking any personality or warmth. "I know it is a mess," Marcus said, looking almost apologetic as they surveyed his study, where papers covered every surface. "I keep meaning to sort through it all, but by the time I finish with the daily work, I am too tired to care." "It is nothing I cannot fix," Helena assured him. "Give me a week, and I will have this house running like a well-oiled machine. 2 weeks, and I might even make it comfortable." She was true to her word. Over the next days, Helena threw herself into transforming the Broken Arrow ranch house. She organized the pantry, set up a proper system for the account books that even Marcus could follow, cleaned and rearranged rooms until they made sense. She cooked meals that had Marcus and Samuel and the ranch hands looking at their plates like they contained miracles. She mended curtains and washed windows and slowly, carefully, made the house into something that felt like a home. And as she worked, she found herself noticing things about Marcus Dalton. The way he was always the first one up in the morning and the last to go to bed at night. How he checked on his cattle and horses with genuine affection, knowing each animal by sight and often by name. The way he listened when people talked, really listened, giving them his full attention like what they said mattered. His quiet sense of humor that emerged in unexpected moments. The laugh lines around his eyes that suggested he had not always been so lonely and serious. She noticed other things too. The breadth of his shoulders when he lifted heavy feed sacks, the strength in his hands when he worked with the horses. The way his whole face softened when he smiled, which he was doing more and more often these days. Helena told herself firmly that noticing such things was perfectly natural and did not mean anything. She was his employee, nothing more. He had given her a job when she needed one desperately, and she would not repay that kindness by developing inappropriate feelings. Besides, Ruth had told her about Susan, about his broken engagement. Marcus Dalton was not looking for romance, and neither was she. She had only just escaped one man trying to control her life. The last thing she needed was to fall for another. But the heart, Helena was discovering, did not always listen to logic. It was a Tuesday afternoon, 3 weeks after her arrival, when everything changed. Helena was in the kitchen, kneading bread dough and looking out the window at the autumn landscape. Marcus had ridden out that morning to check on the cattle in the northern pasture, and she found herself watching the horizon for his return more often than was strictly necessary. When he finally appeared, riding his big bay gelding at an easy lope, Helena felt her heart do a stupid little skip. She scolded herself and went back to her bread, but a few minutes later, she heard the front door open, and Marcus calling her name with an urgency that had her dropping the dough and rushing to the hall. He stood there with a bundle in his arms, and it took Helena a moment to realize the bundle was a child, a little girl of perhaps 7 or 8 years old, unconscious and shivering despite the blanket wrapped around her. "Found her by the creek," Marcus said, his voice tight with worry. "She has a fever and she is half-starved. I think she might have wandered away from a wagon train, but I did not see any sign of one nearby. We need to get her warm and get some water in her." Helena's training from helping her mother care for their household kicked in instantly. "Bring her to my room. I will need hot water, clean cloths, and whatever medicine you have. Ruth will know what herbs might help with fever." The next hours were a blur of activity. They got the child, who they learned was named Emma when she woke briefly, out of her filthy clothes and into one of Helena's nightgowns, tucked into Helena's bed with heated bricks at her feet. Ruth appeared with willow bark tea for the fever, and a thin broth that they coaxed down Emma's throat spoonful by spoonful. Marcus sent riders out to check with neighboring ranches and into Johnson City to see if anyone knew of a missing child or a wagon train that had passed through. Through it all, Helena sat beside the bed, bathing Emma's hot face with cool cloths and talking to her softly when she grew restless. And Marcus stayed too, pacing the room at first, then finally settling in the chair by the window, watching Helena work with an expression she could not quite read. "You are good at this," he said quietly after a while, "taking care of people." "My mother taught me," Helena replied, wringing out another cloth. "She believed every woman should know how to treat basic illnesses and injuries. I used to think it was old-fashioned, but I am grateful for the knowledge now." Emma's fever broke near midnight, and she finally fell into a natural sleep instead of the restless, feverish tossing of before. Helena sagged in her chair, suddenly exhausted, and felt Marcus's hand rest gently on her shoulder. "You should rest," he said softly. "I will watch her for a while." "I am all right," Helena started to protest, but Marcus shook his head. "You have been sitting here for 8 hours straight. Go lie down in my room. I will stay with Emma and call you if anything changes." Too tired to argue, Helena agreed. But when she got to Marcus's room, she found herself looking around with new curiosity. It was as sparse as the rest of the house had been when she arrived, functional but impersonal. Except on the dresser, she noticed a small daguerreotype in a silver frame, showing a young Marcus with an older couple who must have been his parents. They all looked happy, caught in a moment before loss and loneliness had marked their lives. Helena lay down on Marcus's bed, meaning to rest for just a few minutes, but sleep claimed her again. She woke hours later to find morning light filtering through the windows and a quilt that had not been there before tucked carefully around her. When she made her way back to her own room, she found Emma awake and sitting up, with Marcus sitting on the edge of the bed making her laugh with some story about a stubborn cow. "There you are," Marcus said, smiling at Helena in a way that made her stomach flutter. "I was just telling Emma about how you have transformed this house in 3 weeks, made it feel like a home again." Emma looked at Helena with big brown eyes, still weak but recovering. "Mr. Marcus says you are going to help me get better. Are you his wife?" "No," Helena said quickly, feeling her cheeks heat. "I am the housekeeper." "Oh," Emma said, sounding disappointed. "That is too bad. You would make a good wife. Mr. Marcus needs one. He is too nice to be alone." Marcus cleared his throat, looking endearingly uncomfortable. "Emma has been sharing her opinions freely since she woke up. Apparently, my lack of a wife is a serious character flaw." "My papa always said a good man needs a good woman," Emma said seriously. "And a good woman needs a good man. It is just how things work." "Well, Emma, sometimes things are more complicated than that," Helena said gently, bringing over the broth Ruth had sent up. "Now, let us get some food in you, and then you can tell us how you ended up alone out here." Emma's story emerged between spoonfuls of broth. She had been traveling with her parents in a small wagon train heading west to California. 2 weeks ago, her mother had died of cholera, and her father, heartbroken and sick himself, had followed her 3 days later. The other families in the wagon train had wanted to leave Emma at an orphanage in the last town they passed. But Emma had overheard them and run away, hiding among the rocks until they gave up searching and moved on. She had been wandering for days, lost and alone, surviving on berries and creek water until Marcus found her. "I am sorry about your parents," Helena said softly, her heart breaking for this brave little girl. "I lost mine too when I was not much older than you. I know how much it hurts." "What happens to me now?" Emma asked, her voice small and scared. "Do I have to go to the orphanage?" Marcus and Helena exchanged a long look, and something passed between them, an understanding without words. "Not if you do not want to," Marcus said firmly. "You can stay here at the Broken Arrow for as long as you need. We have plenty of room, and Helena makes more than enough food for an army. You will be safe here, Emma. I promise you that." Emma's eyes filled with tears, and she threw her thin arms around Marcus's neck. "Thank you, Mr. Marcus. I promise I will be good. I will work hard and not be any trouble." "You just focus on getting well," Marcus said, his voice rough with emotion. "The rest will sort itself out." Over the next weeks, Emma became part of the household, her presence changing everything in ways both large and small. She adored Marcus, following him around the ranch when she grew strong enough, asking endless questions about the cattle and horses and ranch work. She adored Helena too, helping in the kitchen and chattering away about everything and nothing, filling the house with life and laughter. And watching Marcus with Emma, seeing his gentleness and patience with this orphan child, watching him smile more in a few weeks than he probably had in years, Helena felt her carefully constructed walls begin to crumble. She was falling in love with Marcus Dalton, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The realization hit her one evening in late November as she stood at the kitchen window, watching Marcus teach Emma how to rope a fence post. Emma threw the lasso with more enthusiasm than skill, and Marcus laughed, a full, genuine laugh that transformed his whole face. Helena's heart squeezed painfully in her chest, and she had to grip the counter to steady herself. She loved him. She loved his quiet strength, and his hidden humor, and his lonely heart that was learning to open again. She loved the way he treated everyone with respect, from his ranch hands to this orphan child. She loved his rough hands and his gentle voice, and the way he looked at her sometimes when he thought she was not paying attention. But loving him did not change anything. She was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood and her place in this world. The power imbalance was too great. If she told him how she felt and he did not feel the same way, she would have to leave, would have to find somewhere else to go. And she could not bear that thought, could not bear the idea of leaving the Broken Arrow, leaving Emma, leaving Marcus. So she said nothing, locked her feelings away deep inside, and tried to be content with what she had. But Marcus had noticed. Of course he had. He was not a man who missed much, and he had been watching Helena just as carefully as she had been watching him. He had noticed how her face lit up when he came in from the range at the end of the day. He had noticed how she laughed at his jokes, even the terrible ones. He had noticed the way she looked at him sometimes when she thought he was focused on his account books, her green eyes soft with an emotion that made his heart pound. Marcus Dalton was falling in love, and he had no idea what to do about it. He had hired Helena in good faith, offering her a job and a safe place, and now he was sitting here every night, thinking about her smile, the way she hummed while she cooked, the kindness she showed to Emma and everyone else on the ranch. It felt like taking advantage, like he was breaking some unspoken rule. She was dependent on him, and any declaration of feeling on his part might make her feel obligated to respond positively even if she did not feel the same way. The whole situation was impossible, and Marcus found himself brooding over it while he worked, while he ate, while he lay awake at night in his empty bed knowing Helena slept just down the hall. Ruth, watching these two stubborn people dance around each other, finally had enough. She cornered Marcus one morning while he was saddling his horse. "That girl is in love with you," Ruth said without preamble, "and you are in love with her, and both of you are being ridiculous about it." "Ruth, I cannot just tell her how I feel," Marcus protested. "She works for me. She depends on me for her livelihood. If I say something and she does not feel the same way, she will feel like she has to leave. And if you say nothing, you are both going to waste years being miserable," Ruth shot back. "Marcus, I have known you your whole life, and I am telling you that girl looks at you the way your father looked at your mother. That is real love, the kind that builds a life. Do not throw that away because you are afraid." "What if I am wrong?" Marcus said quietly, voicing his deepest fear. "What if she is just grateful, or she feels obligated, or I am reading signals that are not there?" Susan seemed happy too, right up until she ran off. "Helena Dawson is not Susan Miller," Ruth said firmly. "Susan was a girl who wanted excitement and glamour. Helena is a woman who knows what matters. She has been through hard times and come out stronger. She chose to stay here and build something when she could have kept running. That tells you everything you need to know about her character." Marcus was quiet for a long moment, then said, "How do I tell her? How do I make sure she knows she can say no without consequences?" Ruth smiled. "You are a smart man, Marcus. You will figure it out, but do not wait too long. Winter is coming, and life is too short to spend it alone when you do not have to be. The opportunity came on a cold December evening, 3 months after Helena had first stepped off that stagecoach in Johnson City. The first snow of the season was falling outside, soft flakes that caught the light from the windows and turned the world into something magical. Emma had fallen asleep hours ago after an exciting day playing in the early snow, and Helena and Marcus found themselves alone in the main room, sitting on opposite ends of the couch, watching the fire burn low in the hearth. "I have been thinking," Marcus said suddenly, his voice rough with nerves. "About us, about this arrangement." Helena's heart stopped and cold fear washed through her. This was it. He was going to tell her the arrangement was not working, that she needed to leave. She had been too familiar, had overstepped somehow, and now she was going to lose everything. "All right," she managed to say, proud that her voice stayed steady. Marcus turned to face her, and there was something in his eyes that was not dismissal but looked almost like fear. "When you arrived here 3 months ago, I told you that you came with nothing, but we would start with everything that matters. I said that because I believed it. You standing there with nothing but yourself, that was enough. That mattered." "Marcus, I do not understand," Helena said, confused now instead of just afraid. "What I am trying to say very badly is that somewhere along the way, everything that matters stopped being just the basics of survival and started being you." He took a deep breath, his hands clenched on his knees. "I am in love with you, Helena. I think I started falling that first day, and I have been tumbling ever since. But I need you to know that you do not have to feel the same way. Your job here is secure no matter what you say. If you want to stay as the housekeeper and nothing more, that is fine. If you want to leave and go somewhere else, I will pay you enough to get started wherever you want to go. This is not me as your employer talking. This is just me, Marcus, a man who is terrified of being alone for the rest of his life, especially now that I know what it feels like to have you here." Helena stared at him, her mind trying to catch up with what he was saying. And then suddenly she was laughing and crying at the same time, relief and joy flooding through her in equal measure. "I love you too, you stubborn man," she said, and watched his face transform with wonder and hope. "I have been in love with you for weeks, and I thought you could never feel the same way, that I was just your employee and you were just being kind. I was so afraid of losing what we had that I could not risk asking for more." Marcus moved then, closing the distance between them on the couch and taking her hands in his. "Helena Dawson, you are the bravest, strongest, kindest woman I have ever known. You made my house a home again. You brought light and laughter back into my life. You gave me a reason to look forward to each day instead of just surviving them. Will you let me court you properly? Let me take you to church socials and dances in town. Let me buy you pretty things and walk with you in the evenings. Let me try to be the man you deserve." "You already are the man I deserve," Helena said, lifting one hand to cup his rough cheek. "You saw me at my worst, at my most desperate, and you helped me anyway. You gave me not just a job but a home, not just safety but a family. You trusted me with Emma, with your ranch, with your heart even when you were afraid to tell me. You are everything I did not know I was looking for, Marcus." "Can I kiss you?" Marcus asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I have been wanting to for so long." "Yes," Helena breathed, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and careful at first, then deeper as she responded. It was a perfect kiss, full of promise and hope and the kind of love that built futures. They pulled apart slowly, and Marcus rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "I know it is fast, and you probably want a long engagement, and that is fine. But I am asking now because I want you to know that I am sure. This is not just gratitude or convenience or loneliness. This is me loving you and wanting to spend the rest of my life with you." "Yes," Helena said without hesitation. "Yes, I will marry you, Marcus Dalton. I do not need a long engagement. I have been sure about you from the moment you offered me water on that street in town. Everything since then has just been falling deeper." They kissed again, and this time when they pulled apart, they were both smiling. Marcus kept her hands in his, holding them like they were something precious. "I will go into town tomorrow and buy you a ring. We can talk to the preacher about when to hold the wedding. Whatever you want, Helena. Whatever will make you happy." "I do not need anything fancy," Helena said. "Just you and Emma and our friends. A simple ceremony in the ranch house if the preacher will agree. I want to start our life together without waiting." "Emma is going to be thrilled," Marcus said, laughing. "She has been dropping hints about how we should get married since about 2 days after she arrived." "That child is too smart for her own good," Helena agreed, then grew serious. "Marcus, what about Emma? I know you have been letting her stay here, but have you thought about making it permanent?" "About adopting her legally. I have thought about it," Marcus admitted. "But I was not sure how you would feel about it, taking on a child that is not yours. I know she is not your responsibility." "She is absolutely my responsibility," Helena said firmly. "The moment I chose to care for her, she became mine just as much as she is yours. That child has had enough loss in her life. Let us give her a real home, Marcus. Let us be her parents in truth. I may not have given birth to her, but I love her like she is my own." Marcus pulled Helena into his arms, holding her close as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. "How did I get so lucky?" he murmured into her hair. "How did I deserve to find you?" "We both got lucky," Helena corrected. "We found each other when we both needed it most. That is not luck, Marcus. That is grace." They sat together by the fire long into the night, making plans and dreaming dreams, two lonely people who had found their way home at last. The wedding took place 3 weeks later on Christmas Eve. True to Helena's wishes, it was a simple ceremony in the ranch house with the preacher from Johnson City officiating. Ruth cried through the entire service, and Samuel had to lend her his handkerchief. Emma stood beside Helena as her bridesmaid, beaming with pride in her new dress that Ruth had made for the occasion. The ranch hands attended, scrubbed clean and wearing their best clothes, grinning to see their boss finally looking truly happy. Helena wore a simple blue dress that Ruth had helped her alter, the best she could do with limited time and resources, but Marcus looked at her like she was wearing the finest silk. When they exchanged vows, his voice was steady and sure, and when he kissed her as his wife for the first time, the small gathering cheered. They celebrated with a feast that Helena and Ruth had prepared together, the house filled with food and laughter and joy. As the evening wore on and their guests began to drift away, Marcus pulled Helena aside. "I have something for you," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small wooden box. "It is not much, but I wanted you to have it." Inside the box was a delicate gold locket on a chain. When Helena opened it, she found a tiny photograph of Marcus on one side and an empty space on the other. "I thought you might want to put a picture of Emma in the other side," Marcus said. "Or maybe someday a picture of another child if we are blessed with more. I want you to carry our family with you always." Helena's eyes filled with tears as she fastened the locket around her neck. "It is perfect," she whispered. "You are perfect. This day is perfect." "It is about to get better," Marcus said with a smile. "I had the hands clear out the line cabin on the east pasture, stocked it with firewood and supplies. I thought we could spend a few days there, just the two of us, to start our married life. Ruth has agreed to watch Emma, and the ranch will run fine without me for a little while." "You planned all this?" Helena asked, touched by his thoughtfulness. "I wanted our wedding trip to be special," Marcus said. "I know we are not going to San Francisco or New Orleans or any of those fancy places, but I thought maybe a few days alone together would be nice." "It will be more than nice," Helena assured him. "It will be perfect." They left early the next morning, riding out across the snow-dusted pastures with saddlebags full of supplies. The line cabin was small but cozy, just one room with a fireplace and a bed and a table with 2 chairs. But it was private and peaceful, and for 3 days, Marcus and Helena existed in their own little world. They talked for hours, learning everything about each other, sharing stories from their pasts and dreams for their future. Marcus told her about growing up on the ranch, about learning to ride before he could walk properly, about his parents and the love they had shared. Helena told him about St. Louis, about her parents and the shipping business, about the fear and desperation of her flight west. "I used to think running away was the worst thing I ever did," Helena said one evening as they lay together in the small bed, Marcus's arm around her shoulders. "But if I had stayed, if I had not left everything behind, I never would have found you." "Sometimes the worst moments lead to the best things." "I used to think I was cursed," Marcus admitted. "After Susan left, after my mother died, I thought I was meant to be alone. I threw myself into work and told myself I was content. But I was not content, Helena. I was just surviving. You taught me how to live again." They returned to the ranch 3 days later to find Emma bouncing with excitement and Ruth smiling knowingly. Life settled into a new rhythm, one that felt right and good and true. Helena was no longer the housekeeper but the lady of the house, Marcus's wife and partner in every sense. She threw herself into ranch life, learning to ride properly, helping Marcus with the account books, planning improvements to the house and the ranch operations. Emma thrived under their joint care, growing stronger and happier by the day. In February, Marcus started the legal proceedings to formally adopt her, and when the papers came through in April, they celebrated with a special dinner and a cake that Emma helped Helena bake. "I have a real family now," Emma said that night, her face shining with joy. "A real mama and papa and a real home. I never thought I would have that again after my first parents died." "You will always have us," Helena promised, holding the girl close. "Always, Emma, no matter what." The years that followed were not without their challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, cattle lost to disease and horses injured in accidents. There were times when money was tight and times when Helena and Marcus disagreed about how to handle ranch business. But through it all, their love remained steady and true. In the fall of 1873, Helena gave birth to a son they named Matthew Marcus, a healthy baby with his father's dark hair and his mother's green eyes. Marcus cried when he held his son for the first time, overwhelmed with gratitude and love. Emma was thrilled to be a big sister, helping care for the baby with a seriousness that made both Marcus and Helena smile. 2 years later, a daughter followed, Grace Helena, with her mother's red gold hair and her father's dark eyes. And 3 years after that, another son, James Samuel, named for Marcus's father and their faithful foreman. The Broken Arrow Ranch prospered under Marcus and Helena's joint management. Marcus handled the cattle and horses, the day-to-day operations and the business dealings with buyers and suppliers. Helena managed the household, kept the books with a precision Marcus never could have achieved, and made shrewd suggestions about investments and improvements that increased their profits year after year. But more than prosperity, the ranch was filled with love and laughter and life. Emma grew into a beautiful young woman, smart and capable, who eventually fell in love with one of the ranch hands, a good young man named Thomas, who Marcus approved of wholeheartedly. They married when Emma was 20, and Marcus walked her down the makeshift aisle they set up in the yard with tears streaming down his face. "She will always be my daughter," he said to Helena that night as they watched the young couple dance. "The first child we raised together, even if I did not father her. Thank you for loving her like your own from the very beginning." "How could I not?" Helena replied, leaning against his shoulder. "She brought us together just as much as we saved her. We are a family because of her." Samuel and Ruth eventually retired, moving into a comfortable cottage Marcus built for them on the ranch property. They remained part of the family, always present for holidays and celebrations, spoiling the children and offering wisdom when asked. The children grew, each developing their own personalities and dreams. Matthew was serious and thoughtful like his father, falling in love with ranching from an early age. Grace was spirited and creative, always drawing or writing stories, dreaming of seeing the wider world someday. James was the charmer, able to make anyone laugh, with a gift for training horses that showed itself early, through all the years, through all the changes and challenges and joys. Helena and Marcus's love only deepened. They had started with nothing but themselves, two lonely people taking a chance on each other, and built something extraordinary. On their 20th wedding anniversary, Marcus took Helena back to the line cabin where they had spent their honeymoon. It had been maintained over the years, kept stocked and cleaned for when they needed a private retreat. Now they sat in the same chairs by the same fireplace, older and grayer but no less in love. "I have been thinking about that day in Johnson City," Marcus said, holding Helena's hand. "The day you stepped off that stagecoach with nothing, looking like the world had beaten you down but refusing to stay down. I offered you water and you changed my life." "We changed each other's lives," Helena corrected gently. "I was running and lost, and you were alone and hurting. We healed each other, Marcus. We built something beautiful together. 20 years, 3 children, 1 adopted daughter, and a ranch that is worth 10 times what it was when we married," Marcus said, shaking his head in wonder. "We did good, did we not?" "We did better than good," Helena said. "We did exactly what you said we would on that first day. We started with everything that matters, us, and we built a life from that foundation." Marcus raised her hand to his lips and kissed it gently. "I love you, Helena Dalton. I have loved you from almost the first moment I saw you, and I will love you until the day I die and probably beyond that." "I love you too," Helena whispered. "My cowboy, my rancher, my husband. You are my home, Marcus. You always have been." They sat together in the small cabin, watching the fire burn low. Two people who had found each other when they needed it most and created something lasting and true. The years continued to pass, bringing more grandchildren as Matthew and eventually Grace and James all married and started families of their own. Emma and Thomas had 4 children who filled the ranch with noise and laughter. The Broken Arrow grew and prospered, eventually becoming one of the most successful ranches in that part of Texas. But success was measured not just in cattle and land and money. It was measured in the family dinners that filled the long table Helena had insisted Marcus buy all those years ago. It was measured in the grandchildren, who learned to ride on gentle horses in the same corrals where their parents and grandparents had learned. It was measured in the love that permeated every corner of the ranch, in the legacy of kindness and hard work and family loyalty that Marcus and Helena built together. As they grew older, Marcus and Helena spent more time on the porch of the ranch house, watching the sun set over the pastures they knew so well, holding hands and remembering. They remembered the scared young woman who stepped off a stagecoach with nothing. They remembered the lonely rancher who offered her water and a chance. They remembered every step of the journey they had taken together, every challenge overcome, and every joy shared. On a warm evening in late spring, when Marcus was 72 and Helena was 70, they sat together on that porch surrounded by their children and grandchildren, celebrating their 50th wedding anniversary. The ranch was full of people and laughter and life, exactly as it should be. Emma stood to make a toast. Her own children and grandchildren gathered around her. "To Marcus and Helena," she said, her voice strong despite her emotion, "who saved a lost little girl and showed her what real love looks like. Who built not just a ranch but a family, not just a business but a legacy. Who proved that sometimes the best things in life come from the most unexpected places. Thank you for loving each other and for loving all of us. May we all be as blessed in our own lives as you have been together." Everyone raised their glasses, and Helena looked at Marcus with tears in her eyes. 50 years, she whispered. "Can you believe it?" "Every single one of them worth living," Marcus replied, squeezing her hand. "I would do it all again, exactly the same way, if it meant I got to spend my life with you." As the evening wore on and the celebration continued around them, Helena leaned her head on Marcus's shoulder, exactly as she had done countless times over the past 5 decades. The same gesture, the same comfort, the same love that had sustained them through everything. "We started with nothing," she murmured, echoing the words Marcus had spoken so long ago in Johnson City. "And built everything that matters," Marcus finished, kissing the top of her head. "Us and all of this and all of them. We did all right, did we not, my love?" "We did more than all right," Helena said, smiling as she watched their family celebrate around them. "We did what we set out to do. We loved each other well, we built something lasting, and we created a legacy that will continue long after we are gone. That is everything, Marcus. That is absolutely everything." And sitting there on the porch of the Broken Arrow Ranch, surrounded by the family they had built and the love they had nurtured for 50 years, Marcus and Helena Dalton knew that it was true. They had started with nothing but each other, and from that foundation they had created something extraordinary. A family, a home, a life worth living. The sun set over the Texas grasslands, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink and orange. And the Broken Arrow Ranch, built on love and sustained by it, continued to thrive, just as it would for generations to come. All because one lonely rancher had seen a desperate woman and offered her water, offered her hope, offered her a chance. And because that woman had been brave enough to take it, to trust when she had every reason not to believe in the possibility of starting over with nothing but love and determination. Their story became part of ranch lore, told and retold to children and grandchildren on quiet evenings. The story of how grandmother Helena had arrived with nothing, and how grandfather Marcus had said they would start with everything that matters. Us. 2 words that became the foundation of everything they built, everything they achieved, everything they left behind. And as the years rolled on and eventually, Marcus and Helena passed peacefully in their sleep within months of each other, the way couples who are deeply in love sometimes do, their legacy lived on in the faces of their descendants, in the success of the ranch they had built together, and in the lesson they had taught everyone who knew them. That love, real love, the kind that builds a life and sustains a family through generations, does not require wealth or status or perfect circumstances. It just requires 2 people who choose each other, who work together, who never stop fighting for what they have built. 2 people who understand that in the end, nothing else matters as much as us. The Broken Arrow Ranch still stands today, still run by descendants of Marcus and Helena Dalton, still bearing the mark of the love story that started it all. And if you visit on a quiet evening, some of the old-timers in Johnson City will tell you that you can still feel it. The love that built that place, that sustained it through good times and bad, that made it more than just a ranch but a home, a legacy, a testament to what two people can build when they start with everything that matters. Us.